Welcome, everyone, to People on Dating. I'm your host, Will Morales. And for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, this podcast about the ups and downs of dating and how to navigate through it. Today, my guest is Jessica Yaffa. Did I get your last name right?
You did?
Oh, okay, cool. So she's a two-time published author. Miss Jessica Yaffa is an internationally recognized healthy relationships expert, speaker, trainer, and coach with a degree in sociology from the University of San Diego, California, as well being as a certified professional coach. Along with more than 2 decades of experience, Miss Yaffa holds several positions of leadership within the mental health community. Jessica, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. How are you?
Thanks so much for having me. Thrilled to be here, William.
No, it's my pleasure. So, Jessica, tell us a bit about yourself. What was that journey like? You healthy relationships, expert, speaker, trainer, coach. What was that journey like for you to get here to today?
I have known that I wanted to do something in the world of social services from the time I was teeny tiny. My family jokes that one of my first words was inappropriate. So I've been talking about feelings and analyzing people's experiences from the time I was really small. I got really clear about wanting to specialize in relationships very early in to my career. I actually experienced some significant trauma as a result of some early relationships and really wanted to commit myself to figuring out how to be a space where others could come and feel safe, connected, seen, and understood, while also learning how to break through some of their own unhealthy patterns, beliefs, ways of being, and increase experiences of healthy relationship, connection, etc. So it has been a long road and also feels incredibly purposeful in a multitude of ways.
No, I could imagine. So, today's topic is a good one: relationships in the workplace. I, you know, I've made the mistake a couple of times, Jessica, for falling for a nice young woman at work, and both times no good. One, we ended up going out with each other, but then there was tension after the short romance. And then there was another one where the romance never took place. And I purposely stood away from her. And I said to myself, I can't do this anymore. To me, it doesn't work. You've seen the person every 15 seconds. Can we touch base on that? Because, people seem to say, hey, you can meet someone at work, but if you work in the same department, I think that's I don't know. I'm not a fan. Let's put it that way. It's tough to navigate, in my opinion, unless you guys work in the same building, but in different floors or different departments where you're not going to see each other. I don't know. I'm just trying to make an excuse for it, but then I'm trying to make an excuse, don't do it.
For sure. I think it's complicated because you're right. There are a lot of factors to consider when we're dating someone that we are working with, especially if things go awry or if there's a power dynamic of any sort, right? Whether someone is our boss or we are reporting to the same person and have similar roles, et cetera. There are all sorts of complicating factors that can show up when those dynamics are present. And when we find someone that we're really interested in and have a lot in common with and feel attracted to, it can be really difficult to not consider pursuing what feels like a real possible connection. And so it is a bit tricky. I would say that if you are going to date someone that you work with, it's really important to, number one, just understand the risks right out of the gate, right? And recognize that that the relationship will change if things work out as well as if they don't, and that there are going to need to be some really clear boundaries around the separation from personal relationship and work relationship. And I think there also needs to be some real conversation on the front end about what would this look like if it didn't work out for us, and
Yeah.
does it put us in a scenario that could set us up for what could feel really awkward, really impact the rest of the team, and ultimately really affect our performance. And if the answer is yes, that might be an indicator that either the potential couple needs to press pause and consider coming back and evaluating this when the work dynamic looks different, and or that they're better off pursuing other opportunities. If they recognize that there's enough separation in roles, that they are able to really agree to and adhere to some really concrete boundaries, that there isn't a power dynamic in the relationship, and or that for one or both of them, this particular job is temporary, then in those cases, the risk might be a little less extreme, and therefore it may be something that they choose to consider.
Because and those are definitely valid points. I think too, if you're working with someone for 6 to 8 hours a day, it seems like you get to know them more so than the person you're with, let's say currently, because you're just constantly working with them and all that. You see them when they're mad, you see them when they're happy, you see the expression, you see that they might have a good heart. I mean, it's almost, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's so hard to like separate, is this the person for me? Because I get along with this person so well. But then you gotta, like you said, what are the pros and cons? And there's gonna be probably more cons than pros because you had a workplace, management might not see it your way, both of you, both people's way. How do you like suppress those feelings? That's a tough one. Because I've been there on 2 occasions and it was tough for me to do.
Yeah, I think honestly, William, you don't. That when we try to suppress feelings, we end up experiencing anxiety. We end up showing up in a way that can feel sort of disconnected and inauthentic. And so it's really important that we acknowledge our feelings and then create some boundaries for ourselves. So rather than pushing it down and trying to ignore it, it's much healthier for us to acknowledge this is real. And I do have feelings, and this is complicated. And we are choosing to not pursue this for some really good and valuable reasons. And therefore, some of the ways that I'm going to care for myself at work might be things like I'm not going to go to lunch with this person because I then feel sort of too drawn in, and it creates an increase in some of those feelings that then contribute to it feeling complicated or my feeling anxious. It might be I'm going to choose to work on projects that are with other team members rather than this person if I have the opportunity to have choice, so that I don't grow in increasing feelings in a way that is going to contribute to, again, feelings of confliction or complication. It might be that when we have social outings or activities, that I'm choosing with intention to not ignore this person, but to be really friendly and cordial, and then also spend more time getting to know other members of the group. So we can be really intentional about acknowledging what feels true for us and really honoring those feelings, and then thinking about how can I take care of myself in a situation that feels complicated.
Yeah, wow. Uh I when I went through that, and we're talking with Jessica Yaffa, today's is relationship in the workplace topic. Um, the other person didn't feel the same as I did. Now we went out on a date, and I was, and I remember Jessica oh my God, this is over maybe 15, 20 years ago. I remember leaving, and I remember we hugged and all that, and all of a sudden my heart started like pounding. And when I saw her a couple of days later at work, my feelings were just like through the roof. We talked and everything, but she didn't feel the same. She had someone that she was dating seriously, but they were in another state. So, but I look back, I remember shortly after, I'm like, well, then why go out with me then? You know, so that's how I felt. I mean, I don't know if I'm making a point or if I'm rambling, but it feels like why go with me if you didn't feel the same as I did?
Yeah,
It was it because you were lonely or we were friends. I
yeah.
made it clear that I wanted more than friends. So
Yeah.
yeah, if you could like try to dissect what I'm trying to say.
Sure. Yeah, no, you're making perfect sense. And I think you're really uh, pointing out the importance of almost over communicating
Yeah.
when we are considering dating people at work. It is that much more important that both people are communicating their intentions, their potential feelings, their boundaries on the front end. So if I'm
Right.
going to be asking someone out at work, I'm going to be really clear on the front end about, hey, I'd love to grab dinner or lunch with you. And my intention is simply to get to know you better as a friend. Or I
Mm.
would love to think about getting together outside of work sometime. I am recognizing that I am developing feelings and would like to potentially explore a dating relationship. So when we're really clear on our end, we offer the opportunity then for the person to be really clear on theirs. And if they don't come forward with, I'm having those same feelings, we can ask a question, right? It might sound something like, does that align with what you're feeling or experiencing? Or are you also interested in pursuing a potential dating relationship, or is that not where you are, right? So depending on what comes back to us, we can actually ask for clarification up front so that we have all of the information we need before we even take that first step.
Okay, no, it's a great point. I did it kind of backwards where we went out and then um I wasn't so much expressing myself back in those days when I was younger. So what I did was there was a few songs that expressed how I felt, and I dedicated the music to her. So when she heard it, she goes, "Oh
Mm.
wow, well I have this guy over down there in Florida," and I'm like, "Okay, no problem." So what I did was, once she told me how she felt, which wasn't the same, I basically then avoided her. I didn't want to bother her
Yeah,
or make her feel uncomfortable. So I was aware of that. So I stood
yeah,
away. And she even noticed, oh,
yeah,
you didn't even say hi anymore, whatever. I said, listen, when someone likes someone more than the other person, that person doesn't want to be a bother. And she gave me a hug. Cool. Everything was fine. But I stood away. I had to because I knew she didn't feel the
yeah,
same. So I just stood away. I think that's maybe a way to do it. But then it's like, it's a fine line between, do you still stay friends or you're hurt and now you don't want to be friends? Did I make sense at all? I want to stay friends, but stay away, or not be friends and then just
yes.
completely stay away.
Yes. So I would say that there are some ways to navigate this far before we get to the place where we're having to figure out, how do I now handle this situation now that it's
Yeah.
evident that we're not moving forward? And that might include things like having conversation in the very first opportunity around questions about, if we end up deciding that we want to pursue this, what are some important things that we put in place in order to ensure that we're able to maintain a good working relationship or boundaries at work? And if we decide not to pursue this, whether it's a joint decision or one of us decides that it's not a fit or it's not really working or we're not really feeling it, how can we together collectively ensure that things don't get awkward at work, or that we're able to remain cordial with one another? So before we even dive into exploring, is this going to be a thing or not a thing, if we are able to create a bit of a container where there's already an agreement about how we want to handle this, whether we go this direction or that direction, that can help us to make some of those decisions before all the feelings get involved.
Yeah, it's funny because now that years later, I always tell even close friends, I'm like, if you're gonna step into that hole of dating someone at work, you got to know the ABCs of this person. You got to know if you could handle it. If he sees you talking to someone, or you see him talking to someone, or vice whatever, or you don't get jealous or whatever. I think it's. I always try to tell people now, hey, know what you're doing, even in social circles, Jessica, where I have friends and people end up going out with each other in the same circle. Now I have a friend where they don't talk to the other person moved on, and now there's another set where the two people, they broke up, but they're cordial with each other. They go their separate ways, but they're cordial, they're friendly, they might talk once in a blue moon. I just think it's such a that thin line between, are you going to hate that person, or you still, can set your feelings aside. Again, more in a social circle, not work, but in a social circle. Again, how do you leave the group? Do you stay in with the
Yeah.
group? But again, just keep
Yeah.
that distance. And I've been around that, and it could be uncomfortable, or it could be, they're getting along. That's great. Again,
Yeah.
am I in the same ballpark as when it comes to relationship at work? Now it's a social setting.
Sure, I would say you're spot on,
Okay.
that some of those
Okay.
some of the identical conversations should also be happening very early on in a dating relationship when two people are a part of the same social circle. So if this works
Okay.
out, great. And yet it's really important that we maintain our individual friendships and that we continue to have time separate from one another with our friends in addition to hanging out together. And if it doesn't work out, how do we ensure that we remained respectful and considerate of one another? And what are our rules of engagement around the boundaries that we want to have in place so that if it doesn't work, we are talking kindly about one another, and we also have an expectation that our people are going to remain our people rather than
Yeah.
having to take sides, etc. So it's always so much better for all of us when we are having these conversations on the front end rather than trying to navigate these conversations or make these negotiations when something has already transpired where people are angry, hurt,
Mm.
feeling did, et cetera. Whenever we can do this preemptively, it offers us a bit of an accountability plan, if you will, in a way that can be really tricky to define when we're already feeling dysregulated.
I like that. So, Jessica, what would be, let's say, if someone was to want to date someone at work or in their social circle, would there be like steps to take first? Like you said, talk about it, what are the pros and cons? What would be a couple of steps that you could like recommend?
Yeah, great question. So I think the first would be, what else do I want to gather information about? Or what else do I want to know about this person that I don't already know in order to gauge whether this person is someone I want to date? So I experience them as being really friendly at work or a lot of fun when we're out with our group of friends, but I don't know anything about their relationship with family, or I don't know anything
Mm,
about whether or not they have children. I don't know anything about how they interact with friends outside of work. And so, how might I gather some additional information in order to get clear about whether or not this is someone that I want to pursue? What kinds of questions do I want to ask? What sorts of conversations do I want to have? What kinds of social scenarios might I want to be in with this person before declaring that this is someone that I am interested in? Because we do have access to a certain part of someone when we're working with them or when we're hanging out with them, on Friday evenings for dinner or at a bar,
right.
but there are all sorts of parts of someone that we don't know and that we don't have access to. So we want to gather as much information as we can before we decide, yes, this is someone that I'm interested in pursuing. So
And
that's first and foremost.
okay, so that's basically asking questions, getting maybe just eyeballing how they are around other people, but basically it's just communicating, right? Like asking questions. Would that be like something? Hey, get to know the person more. That I
I mean,
just
even
getting right to
asking.
the point. Yeah,
Absolutely. If we're working with someone, it might be as simple as for a few weeks, hey, tell me about what you did this weekend. And if they're constantly partying and that doesn't align for us, that's going to be an indicator that that's not our person, right? Or if they
right.
say, oh, I'm having all sorts of drama with my family, so I spent the weekend dealing with that, that may also be an indicator for us that it's not a person that we want to pursue. Where if they say,
Okay.
oh, I was volunteering this weekend, or I hung out with my dog all weekend, if those are things that are meaningful for us, that gives us information that, again, we are learning more about the person that supports our going one way versus another. It might also be in our friend group saying, hey, how did you come to know so and so? Or what do you have in common with these few people? Those
Mhm.
sorts of questions are going to help us know not just about what they do for work or what they are ordering for dinner, but a little bit more about their background and how they build connections, and the things that they do have in common with our mutual connections, as well as the things that maybe they don't have in common. So yes, it
Right.
really is all about asking open-ended questions.
Anything else that we should look out for, or especially at work? I could definitely get that because you're around each other for long periods of time. You can ask questions, observe them and all that, but in a social setting, would that be also the same thing, getting to observe them, asking questions, like I said, how was their weekend and things like that? But is there anything else that we should also look for? Because now in modern dating, it's always watch out for the red flags. What should we look for?
For sure. Yeah, great question. So things like if we're at work, how do they talk about their coworkers? Or how do they interact
Mm,
with our boss? Or are they constantly late to work or always leaving early? Are they an active team member on this project or are they looking for someone else to do the work? That all is about our character, right? For the most part. And
mm,
so that gives us a lot of information. In a social situation, we might notice how do they treat the waiter? Or how many
mm.
drinks are they having? Or what are they talking about doing for the rest of the weekend, right? So, a lot of opportunity, even in a single scenario, to gather information about, again, a person's character, values, et cetera, and just noticing some of those things that we might not otherwise think to be paying attention to.
Wow. It's funny because sometimes when you're in a social setting, and let me put it for me, in a social setting, you get to see people, but sometimes you have a couple of drinks and then you don't remember certain things or whatever. But I think how they treat other people, I think for me that's an indicator. If they're polite or they're a little snootish or whatever, I look at that and I'm like, I don't know if this is a person that if they're angry, how they're going to react to certain things. At work, it's 100% you're correct there, how they talk about other coworkers. And I've worked with people that they talk shit about their coworkers. I'm like, oh man, that's and I even got caught up in that. But this is not someone that I care to date or whatever. It's just a little bit of a gossip thing. But I think if you, like you just said, if you're looking to date someone at work on a social setting, yeah, you gotta look out for the red flags. I agree with you 100%. First of all, Jessica, I want to thank you so much for being on People on Dating. And before I let you go, anything else you want to talk about? Anything else you want to promote? Any like the next 100 books you have coming out?
Thanks so much for asking. So, just want to acknowledge that myself and my team are here to support folks all over the country in navigating relationship dynamics, whether new relationships, existing relationships, coming out of relationships, relationships with kids, aging parents, et cetera. And just feel really grateful, William, to you for opening the door to this conversation. It's complicated, and there's no one answer for all of
Yeah.
us, right? Which I think is why we've really dug into some of the details today, that there's not, unfortunately, not sort of a prescription. It's really about checking in with ourselves and getting
Yeah.
clear about the information we want to have access to before making a decision.
Yeah, I think also it's just being self-aware. I mean, the two times that I ended up dating someone from work, the first time I was self-aware, okay, you know what, this person doesn't feel the same, let me move on. The second time it was a little messy, but we ended up, uh talking it out. I like I said, it's complicated because feelings do come up, especially when you're working with someone and you're in your social setting. Anything else you want to talk about or promote?
No, I just say that I guess the only other thing is that we always have the right to change our mind. That we might be going in one direction and then decide, oh man, I thought that this made sense for me, and yet it's starting to feel really complicated, or I didn't feel like I wanted to pursue this. And now the more and more I'm getting to know about this person, I'm feeling like there might really be a strong connection and it's worth the risk. So we want to give ourselves permission to identify our boundaries and then also acknowledge that we have the right to change our mind along the way based on circumstances and based on feelings.
Yeah. No, no, 100%. And if somebody want to get in contact with you, what's the best way?
Yeah, website is always great, jessicayaffa.org, Y-A-F like Fred, F like Fred, A.org, or Jessica at jessicayaffa.org if you want to shoot me an email.
Yeah, I'll definitely put that on the show notes. Well, anyway, Jessica, again, thank you so much. I probably could have talked to you for another hour with this subject because this is a good subject and a touchy subject at the same time. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule.
You bet, William. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. Bye bye.